The following podcast is taken from a live broadcast on Inspire FM.
Assalamu alaikum everyone, and welcome to Sisters Speak.
We also have an Instagram page called Sisters Speak where you can let us know your thoughts or any topics that you want us to discuss during the live.
Yeah, nice.
Sorry, I'm out of breath. I came a bit late.
Yeah, that's okay. You came on time. So we've got Fareen in the studio as well today.
Hi everyone.
So just to let everyone know what our show is about before we get into it all, our show is a platform for Muslim girls to voice their own opinions on various different topics, ranging from things like religion to culture, politics. So yeah, please do note that all opinions and views are our own, and we respect all other similar or opposing views and opinions. Yep. Okay, so nice intro to the show.
I was going to say, I was literally going to say, me and Lamisa were non-existent because of our exams.
Oh, our exams, exactly. We're suddenly back. Exam season's over, thank God. I
feel like we had no life. How was your exam season, Lamisa?
It was okay. It was, I guess these are our thoughts for the week. We can just have a little mini discussion. Yeah. It was interesting. I feel like exam season is always so draining. It just takes it all out of you. You prep so much for these like exams which are 2-3 hours max, and then everything kind of rides on it, or it feels that way.
It's so weird. The last year of your exams feels like you have no life. I'm getting so bored at home now because
Really?
you have no schedule of doing anything.
Yeah, we can definitely talk about that because our hot topic is going to be about what to do in the summer before uni and how you're going to prep for uni and things like that. But let's get on to our thoughts for the week. So Fareen, what's your thought for the week this week?
I've been thinking about prayer a lot. I don't know why. I feel like I feel like in this now that I don't have anything to do is the one thing I feel like I should focus on and give all my time to. And with prayer there's so many things involved in it, like you have to do your wudu and everything. So I was just thinking about, when you're in your lady days, that's when you most think about it, when you can't do anything. And I think taking advantage of that period when you feel like, I have to pray but I can't, I have to pray but I can't, that period was such a good time for me to kind of sit down and be like, okay, I have to get closer to my deen. What am I doing to get closer to my deen? And like when you can't pay with your nails painted, so taking them off and doing that whole ritual that we do before prayer. So I take, for example, I clean my nails, you do your ghusl and everything, and then you go to prayer. And I feel like that whole period that you do before it is so important to get in the mindset that I have to pray now. So that's all I was thinking about, that if this wasn't in place, like if we didn't have to do it, I feel like you're in so many places all over it. You're thinking about this, you're thinking about that, and when you actually get to the prayer, you're like, this is just one of the things I have to do. Focusing on the prayer. And I saw so many things where people that relate to this a lot and on social media and stuff, and they said that during prayer you think about stuff that you wouldn't think, like random stuff, what am I going to eat today and stuff like that. And it's so normal. It's something that happens to all of us. So that before, like 10 minutes before prayer, you take that time to think that I'm going to pray, and all the stuff that you're going to think about in that prayer, do it before. That's all I've been thinking about, and I've been trying to do it myself.
That's such a good thought for the week. And the fact that you are thinking about taking that time prior, because just like you said, we add prayer on a list of things that we just have to get through, and that's why we get all these random thoughts. But actually taking the time beforehand to get ourselves into the zone and prepare for prayer is what helps you when you go into it to just focus on that one thing. That's very eye-opening, and I feel like we all need that reminder.
I know, it's because it's praying on time. It's a thing that I couldn't do when I was in college, for example. Every time I used to, it's just something that it was in during my day, but nothing. It's bad to say, but nothing that I would be like, I just have to do it because I have to do it. There was no thought process behind it because I was so stressed and I had so much stuff to do, and there was so much noise and all of that. But that peace of mind that I'm going to pray, and you're like thinking about what's going to do. I've just been happy to do that now in summer, that you have that peace of mind. You don't have anything to do. And all you can focus on is your deen.
Exactly. And you're building that connection with God. I'm doing the same thing, which is amazing to hear that you're doing the same thing too. I'm like, I go on the train a lot, and I realize when I'm on the train, I do nothing. like absolutely nothing. I don't listen to anything. All I do is stare out the window. I'm just a weirdo. I don't do anything. And I was thinking, I'm like, why don't I actually try and learn something whilst I'm on the train, or put an Islamic talk on or something like that? I feel like doing that on my train journeys has, you know, every single day having that little bit of connection with God, or learning about God, or learning about something about our deen, helps you kind of take that knowledge in.
Yeah, definitely. You know, with Islamic talks, I feel like even if you don't agree with them, it's so important to listen to them and get every kind of point of view that there is. And you know, with just staring out the window for 2 hours, I can easily do that and just daydream, which is so bad, because then, like I said, you get so distracted in prayer. So in a train journey, I can sit there and just think. Yeah. I normally sleep on train journeys though for 2 hours. I don't know why, the whole body warm around me, it just makes me so sleepy.
I get worried about missing my stop, so I
couldn't care less. I just sleep.
You just sleep. Fair enough. I mean, but I think our main message here is to try and use the free time that you have in a productive way, not in a stressfully productive way, but in a productive way, in an easygoing, productive environment where you are learning things as you go along and you're using your time appropriately. Because at the end of the day, time is a finite resource, and you're not really going to get that time back. When I look at all the summer holidays that I've wasted, it seems sad. But yeah, I think I've been thinking about learning a new language. I really want to brush up on my Spanish skills.
I can help you with that.
Yeah, that would be great. I would love to I was good at it at GCSE. So I think that's something I want to do, is learn a new skill as well in this free time that I have.
You just mentioned GCSEs. I'm just going to put this out. I have so much anxiety about results day. Really? I cannot stop thinking about it, and it's ruining my summer holidays. Honestly,
I can imagine. I was the same as you. It's terrible. I only had a week before my exams and my results, and so it was for this exam that just gone past. Alhamdulillah, I passed.
Oh, that's so nice. Congratulations, Louisa.
Thank you. But in that week, I know it's so hard to not think about anything else. But I think at one point, when you just kind of accept that it's happened and this thing is going to happen anyway, you just kind of try and push it to the side and do other things in the meantime. Me and my friends, we went out to SeaWorld or Sea Life to look at some fishes, I think the day before, to reduce the stress.
Oh, that's so cute. It's my first time that there's a results day in place. There's never this, am I passing or am I not? I used to get it the day after, the week after, and stuff like that when I was in high school. So this is I feel so.
So in Spain, do they give it straight away?
Yeah, in Spain there's 3 semesters, and there's a week of exams, and then literally if my exam finish on Thursday, by Monday I have my results.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, it depends on the semester. So if you have a 5, for example, first, second you have a 5, and in the third you have a 4, then the median, is like a 5.
The average, yeah. Okay,
that's how it works.
Makes sense.
It doesn't depend on one exam. That's why I have so much anxiety about this one.
About it is, the whole exam situation and whether they're accurate representation is, a whole other topic.
Yeah.
But yeah. I guess that wraps up our thoughts for the week. Should we move on to our hot topic now?
Let's do it.
Okay, so our hot topic is about, we've discussed a bit of what to do with our summer and what to do with our free time. Try not to stress about results is the main thing. It's a big try, okay? It's hard. But, try not to stress about it. What about preparing for uni? What are you kind of thinking about? How are you trying to prepare for these things?
So I talked about it, so is all I'm talking about. I don't want to move away from my family. But when I was applying for it, and I was I want to go to accommodation, all I can think about was I'm going to live by myself. Now that it's getting closer to the time, I don't want to leave my brothers, because they're right. I've been with a year with them, I'm so close, not close to age, but I'm a big, I would like to think I'm a big part of the life. So now that I'm moving away, I don't want to do it. I don't want to leave my parents as well. So all I'm doing is I'm trying to get as much time as possible so I don't regret it when I go.
Of course.
And I'm not I'm going to miss you so much because I haven't spent enough time with you. So that's what I'm trying to do as well in my summer holidays, now that I don't have anything to do.
Yeah.
The one thing I'm going to say is here, school goes on forever, I feel like. It goes until the 22nd of July.
Oh, your first year?
No, primary school.
Oh, in primary school, yes.
We used to finish on the 19th of June. I was so surprised. I was like, what's going on? So that's the one thing I'm trying to do. Trying to spend as much time, make a lot of moments. And obviously, it's my own independent journey that is going to happen anyways, I like it or not. But, now it's getting closer to the time. I'm a bit scared. Yeah. I'm looking forward to it. It's half and half.
the whole year I was thinking I'm not gonna live out. And then it got to it and I'm like, oh, I'm actually gonna live out. And I think it is kind of that half feeling of I don't want to leave my family. And I think the first time and the first night, I think my family were dropping me off. They were like crying on the way back. And it's all like really sad and emotional, but you just get used to it. And it is such a cool experience to be able to stay in uni, I think, because you're surrounded by everyone who's in this learning environment. But yeah, that kind of anxiety is always going to be there.
I feel like I'm the sentimental one in my family, so I'm going to cry a lot when I leave. Hi, Mariam.
Mariam's joined us today. How was your journey in, Mariam? Was it okay?
Very long today.
Just to bring you up to speed on what we're talking about, we discussed a bit about, our summer holidays and how to use our time a bit more. But now we're talking about preparing for uni, which is something we're both quite well versed in. And Fareed is going to go now. She's on that journey. Freema's saying how she has this kind of mixed feeling excited but also feeling kind of anxious to leave it all behind. How did you feel when you were kind of prepping for uni?
I think my experience was different to both of yours because I lived at home, but at the same time I did feel those usual typical feelings of anxiety that you're doing something new and unfamiliar. And the transition from sixth form to university is quite a stark one because suddenly you have to be very independent. And suddenly that you're responsible for your education, and if you don't do it, no one's going to really chase you up. You're just going to be kicked out.
Very
quite
true.
frankly, right?
Yeah.
So whilst you're 17, 18, you have to ask permission to go to the bathroom. Now you are solely responsible for your education. So I think for me it was very nerve-wracking, just as most people feel. But I think one thing that helped me to navigate that is everyone else is in the same boat and everyone else wants to make friends, everyone else is missing home, everyone else feels that they're really out of place, and I think you just allow yourself time to be able to adjust. Try to meet like-minded people, and try to meet people that are not like-minded as well is really important. Great minds don't think alike, I think, so I think you should try to immerse yourself in different kind of groups, but you don't have to plunge in straight away. You just have to assess yourself, what you're comfortable with. And I think one of the advices that I had a couple of years ago, well, not a couple of years ago, but recently, that you should be able to assess what your comfort zone is, and you should go to an extent that you're uncomfortable, but it shouldn't be to the point where you can't navigate it at all, because that's not conducive to your development. So just try to have a middle boundary where you're uncomfortable, but you're able to have foresight. Don't go into the depth where that you can't see anything. So I think that's kind of the way I approached it. But I think you evolve because your personality evolves, your growth. You're growing, and you develop, and even the people that you surround yourself with also change. And that's okay as well.
For sure. I think you're there for a long time. 3 years is a long time. And it's a really long journey. So just take it as it comes, I think the biggest thing is as well, like Mariam said, meet new people. Just try and meet so many different types of people, because I feel like once you find your group and once you find your people, you're stuck with them. But not only that, like, it's good. Try and meet so many different people from so many different walks of life, because I feel like that's the only place you get that full opportunity is when you're all new at a new university. You're all in the same boat. You're all trying to like meet each other and make new friends. And that's something that you don't get again afterwards. I've been at uni for 5 years, so it's a long time.
That's a long time.
And now I know all the faces. I'm just there like, I know everyone now. So yeah, I would say try and meet as many new people as you can. Make lots and lots of friendships.
Can I ask a question?
Go ahead.
What was your experience in terms of trying to find good company? I think that would be useful for you, Pareen.
I think in my mind, I knew my values when I went to uni. I was very set on them. And I think it's the same thing because I had that experience going to a completely different school where I didn't know anyone at like the age of 11. So I feel like for me, what was really important is me knowing my values and me knowing what I'm comfortable with and not comfortable with. And so when you have that and when you're certain in that and sure in that, when you go to a new environment where the situation around you can be uncertain, I feel like if you're sure in yourself, then you'll be able to navigate those waters much better. you know, and that helps you to find new company because you know which types of people you want to be surrounded by. And when someone gives you a vibe where you feel like that doesn't match with me, then you're not gonna pursue that any further. Whereas you can tell which people are kind of on the same wavelength as you and who you get along with, and their values end up being the same. I feel like a lot of the time we attract people who have the same values as us, and I feel like you'll end up doing that when you go to uni anyway.
I think
it's a learning experience though at the end of the day.
Definitely.
So, yeah.
But I think if you have, especially with peer pressure, sometimes it's quite easy to fall into that trap. So whilst you might have very strong values, some people may fall into that trap of thinking, I have to be with these people because they're the first people I met. And I know a lot of people have recounted these experiences. Alhamdulillah, it wasn't my experience. So I think for that, you have to be able to just politely push them away. Because you just have to be quite diplomatic about it. You could say, okay, I'm going to the library at this time, would you be able to come? And more often than not, they won't be able to come. So then that's how you kind of just, I think people will realize, okay, this person isn't really interested, and then just move on. So don't feel like you have to stick to the people that you just initially met. Like you can ascertain whether they're good for you or not. And if you do feel like, okay, this person is making me uncomfortable, don't be silent about it. Speak to someone you trust, speak to your family, speak to someone that you can confide in, because sometimes it's really hard to navigate all the emotions that you're feeling simultaneously, especially with the pressure of university and the pressure of living out and the pressure of good company. It all kind of cascades on you. So it's really important that you are able to articulate that. And even if you feel like you can't express or it's not tangible, I think it's just important just to speak wherever you can speak. There's a lot of service at university as well in terms of well-being. And if you feel like other areas of your university life is being affected, then definitely go speak to student well-being, because they can help you in that sense as well. And usually Students' Union have a advice centre that's impartial as well, so you can go to them as well.
Yeah, perfect. I think I'm really good at pushing people away when I don't feel their vibe.
That's good.
Yeah, I think it's just, you'll go there, you'll meet people, take it as it comes.
It should be so normal, if I don't vibe with you the first time we met and you feel it as well, there's no point in forcing it just for the sake of being there physically.
Yeah, 100%. It's fun thinking of you like going to uni and having that new
after
experience.
When I'm like moving in and stuff, when I come back from here, I'm gonna be like, I had the worst time, or I had the best time.
Yeah.
So we'll see how I evolve.
I hope it goes well. I hope you meet some
Inshallah.
lovely people, inshallah. And the thing is you'll have so many different, I'm sure you'll have so many different classes, so many chances. Like, if you don't get along with a certain group, you'll have so many opportunities to meet other people.
Yeah.
Thing with living out, though, is there might be times where you might feel lonely, and that's just 100% normal, because you're leaving from a family household where we're all surrounded by so many people and things like that. You're going to a place where you are you, and you're by yourself. You don't have anyone who's like inherently attached to you. For example, when I'm at home, like my siblings are already there, and they're always gonna, if I'm going out, I'm gonna need to tell someone that I'm going out, things like that. Whereas when you're at uni and you're sharing a flat with 6 other people, obviously you don't have to report back to these people or anything like that. You're not attached in any way. And so sometimes, people might go and you might feel alone. There might be so many different situations. But yeah, I guess the thing is it's just ups and downs. It's just, you learn how to live by yourself. You learn how to become a bit more self-dependent rather than, dependent on other people. So it's a good experience overall, I'd say. I'm actually doing the opposite thing. I'm moving back home this year, so I'm going to be commuting. I'm going to see what commuter life is like. So yeah, it's going to be interesting change.
A lot of people do that in final year.
There's no point, because it's a really short year and I don't want to pay rent anymore. It's very expensive. And we're
cost of living crisis.
Yeah, we're quite lucky in Luton, where we're very close to London. So if you do go to university in London, it is quite commutable. So yeah.
Yeah, I personally don't like the whole commuting thing. I feel like it's so long, so I only want to come back on weekends. Sitting 2 hours in the train. I told Misa before you came that I'm okay with sitting 2 hours in the train daydreaming. I'm gonna take it back, because I don't think I can do it commuting. If I have a class at 9 a.m, you'll have to leave at 6 a.m. I can't do it.
It is tough. I think a lot of things that commuters do is they stay put in one place, i.e. if they've gone to uni, they'll stay in uni for however long they need to stay to and stay afterwards so that they can get some studying done before they get home. And then once they get home, they fully turn off. Whereas I feel like people who live out, you go home, because uni is so close, like you go home, you try and do a bit of studying there, then you're like, let me go back to uni, and then you go and you see someone that you're going to start chatting to, and then you don't really, and you end up just not getting much work done. So don't fall into that trap, okay? When you get into the mind of studying, make sure you just sit there, because I know my house was like 10 minutes away from uni, but I would spend all those 10 minutes going to and from, because I'd be like, oh, my house is close by, I can just run, but you just waste so much time in between. So yeah, for any students out there, when it does get to crunch time and you need to study, just pick a spot and get into the zone.
Also pick a spot in the library and choose that same spot that you're comfortable, because more often than not, most people do that, and then that other person will hold you accountable, and they might do a completely different degree to you. But it's very good to have a library partner. Yeah. And also, you don't have to only just be friends with people in your course. Whilst it's good to have some sort of allies in your class if you don't show up or if you can't, it's really good to have friends that are from other disciplines, because it really does broaden your mind. And university is a space for discussions and to think about other perspectives. So that's the place you should do it. Don't just think you have to be exclusive in terms of who you interact with, especially when it comes to your course. I think sixth forms tend to have that kind of way of thinking just because it's so small, but you have to think about in university it's so extensive, and there's so many extensive views as well.
Yeah, I'm hoping to be really active when I go there in my first year.
Yeah, join as many societies as you can. I actually regret that. I think I joined like one society. Join as many as you can. There's so many like random things that go on at uni, so I'd say like things like climbing as well, like just random things you'd never think you'd get involved in. Do that type of stuff.
There was a society in my university that was a Nintendo Switch society.
Wow.
And people used to just book out lecturers and used to play Switch.
And so yeah, we had like
screen.
film club and things like that. They'd like project films in the lecture theatre. Do it, because you're not going to do it afterwards when it's not fun anymore. Or they do a lot of free things as well. Mm-hmm. So I'd be like, if there's any students listening, sign up to all the free activities, because you're never going to get that opportunity to do again.
Yeah, take all the freebies and Freshers' Fair. Just take it. Even if you don't need it, just take it.
I will. I feel like the one more thing I'm worried about is the whole transition thing, so moving all my stuff, because I feel like it's not going to fit in that room, and then I'm going to have to cook by myself, that whole thing that my mom does for me. Yeah. I'm going to have to grow out of that.
But it's good learning skills for your future. That's one thing definitely. I do feel like I've had, because I commuted and I didn't live out, I feel like I really have missed out on those skills. And people can argue, okay, you can do that in your own house, but you really won't do it because your mom's there.
I still got my mom to... Not got my mum, but my mum still cooked for me.
And like, your situation is very different.
And I put it in the fridge.
But your situation is so different. I just feel like at this age, I should know how to cook. And my mom's probably thinking, the first time she said something that's really productive on radio.
Yeah.
No, I think cooking is a skill.
I think you learn these skills though. At one point, you will pick it up. Whenever you end up being by yourself. Like I say, I can't cook, but if I needed to,
you can do it.
Yeah. I could if I needed to. But yeah, I feel like these are life skills that you just end up picking up as time goes on. Yeah. I think one other thing I wanted to talk about is going to uni is the actual education aspect of it, because obviously that is a big part of it. Fundamental part of it. In terms of the jump from A-level to uni, did you feel like there was a jump, first of all? And how did you try and overcome that jump? What are some of our educational tips?
For me, my kind of trajectory is a bit different, because I did sciences and then I did English literature degrees. Mm-hmm. So it was a jump from GCSEs to degree 11. So I was really stressed in my first year, because whilst everyone else was moving from the A-levels to the first year of university, which is usually their similarities, I was having to learn basic writing skills in terms of how to pose an argument in terms of a degree level, whilst I just jumped from GCSE level. Yeah. So that was really, really difficult. But I think the way I kind of navigated that was I was quite expressive to my lecturers, and I was very honest with them. I said, I don't have the same requisites as everyone else in terms of having that support during A-levels. I did sciences. It's very different. It's very granular. It's not more about your thought processes. It's very objective. And now you're telling me to write something really subjective. And I remember I had this one piece of feedback which was really disgruntling. I remember this lecturer saying that this is like the worst piece of like, this is not how you write an essay. And if anyone ever writes feedback like that, you should report them. That's the first thing I would say. They are not allowed to speak to you like that. They're not supposed to demonize you. The whole point is that you're paying them so much money for them to teach you, to help you improve. You're literally paying them, and it's your right for you to go report that. So do report it. I say that quite with emphasis. So yeah, I think that was quite difficult. And the way I kind of tried to help myself was I tried to make friends that were quite comfortable with doing essays. I tried to do external research and try to figure out, okay, how do I write? I even got myself a tutor in my first year, not for degree level. I literally got it for like A level or GCSE level. I don't have a recollection. But the point is, I was very proactive in terms of how I can help myself so I can be on par with everyone. And I never felt on par with everyone. I think that's the main point as well. It actually took me two years, or even my final year, it took me 2 to 3 years to figure out, okay, this is where I stand, this is where my position is. But I think if I look back, I think those experiences, whilst it didn't translate in terms of my grades, well, alhamdulillah, I actually got 69 average, but whilst I didn't feel it was indicative of my intellect because I wasn't able to articulate myself because I didn't have those skills that everyone else, and it wasn't an equitable experience. I do think that it made me resilient, and I think you have to realize that you can only do what you can, and the rest is Allah. Firstly, you have to recognize that, because that's within your capacity, and Allah doesn't ask you to feel very demonized about what your outcome is. He just wants you to do your best. So have that feeling inside. But I think I'll finish this point in the next half.
Okay, that's absolutely fine. So yeah, thank you all very much for listening. I think that was a really productive discussion on going to uni, and to summarize what Mariam said, it's trying to take proactiveness in your approach to learning, which will help you in university for sure. But yeah, inshallah, we'll see you all in the next half to discuss our main topic. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum, this is Atif Nawaz. Listen to Inspire FM shows in your time by heading over to inspirefm.org or listen on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Ya hala, ya hala, ya hala.
Assalamu alaikum everyone, and welcome back to Sister Speak. You're joining us after the break. Prior to the break, we discussed a bit about going off to uni and making a bit more use of our time. And now we're going to move on to our main topic, which is surrounding our identity and the extent to which it has an influence on our place in society. It's quite an interesting topic and quite a lot of different angles to delve into this from. I'm going to start off quite broadly. Okay, just to grasp an idea of what identity is and what identity means. How would you describe your identity? And how would you describe yourself?
Okay, I'll go first. I'll describe myself. Does it include like ethnicity and stuff?
What does it mean to you? What does it mean?
Okay, I'm just gonna say I feel like I'm a loud person. I laugh a lot. Yeah. I like to talk a lot with people, and I'm a really family orientated person.
I think for me that would be more your personality, right?
I don't know.
What's your identity?
Otherwise, I can say my ethnicity is Indian. I don't know what identity is.
Identity for me is your sense of self, right?
Okay.
So it's how you identify yourself, which is literally the word probably derives from.
Probably.
And so yeah, for me it's like if we think about what identity means by Oxford definition, I think that's what it is. But I think it's how, if someone asks me what do you identify, and I would say I'm Muslim, and I think if someone asked me that would be the first immediate response, because that's something that I'm very proud of, and I think that's how I live my life according to my morals and beliefs. Of course, I have other aspects of my identities there's not one more than me, but there's other aspects to my identity where I have an ethnic background, I have my nationality. I think those are the things that we kind of often subscribe to identity. But I do think that's quite interesting how Fareen said that she immediately describes herself in terms of personality,
yeah, exactly.
Which is actually really interesting. I think that's quite a nice way to describe yourself. Like, I identify someone that,
the attributes and
the qualities that you have. It's not necessarily just these kind of labels that we subscribe to.
And I think what was interesting when you were speaking is the fact that all of the attributes that you described towards identity, for example, your religion or your ethnicity or your nationality, are like groups of like labels that people subscribe to, where groups of people subscribe to. It's almost like what group you belong to. So even though identity is kind of meant to be, or we would see it as an individual type thing, maybe it's a bit more broad and collective in nature than we realize. Isn't it like there's so many things that amount to your identity, so there's no one thing?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So in terms of how you guys described yourself there and then, do you think that other people who saw you would have the same description of you, or would agree with that?
I think a lot of people don't ever identify my ethnicity correctly, so I'm not going to even open that discussion.
I see you.
I can back Mariam up because I did think she was Arab when I first met her, so...
Anyways, we move on the conversation.
So I think what I was trying to show with that question is that we've all said so many different things as to what contributes to our identity, but then the way other people then view you, they also have a different idea of what your identity is. And it kind of goes to show that identity means different things to other people, but also your identity, what it's dependent on, is not just on you and your kind of lineage or where you're from or your background and things like that, but also depends on what people around you are saying. In that sense, that can also have a big contribution to your identity as a person. What do you guys think about that?
I feel like for identity, so the question that you ask is about how other people perceive you, because we have a definitive way of describing identity. Immediately we would see, okay, this person has this ethnicity, this person subscribes to this ideological belief. But I don't think when someone first meets someone, I don't think you think about their identity, you think about their impression and how they, for me personally, is how do they make me feel. Whilst in nature I would say, okay, this person looks like this, they might be from a certain culture, but I wouldn't say this is their identity. I don't think that would be the forefront of my thoughts. The forefront of my thoughts would be, okay, what is my impression of them?
I guess it's not the first thing, but it is something that contributes to it, is the point that I was trying to make, in terms of, and it might not be the first thing for you, but you don't know about other people, because there are loads of other people in the world who would see someone and would try and gauge their identity and contribute to it as well.
Contribute in what sense?
So there is a lot of ways that people can contribute to the making up of an identity, I feel, in my personal opinion. And I feel like we do it a lot in media in terms of describing mass groups of people. We give them labels and we give them attributes and we give them connotations, and that builds up an identity for them, which they themselves haven't even had a chance to show or rectify or adjust in any way, shape or form. And so then in that sense, people can take that identity and run with it, and it might just become the first thing that they realise when they see another person. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so what you're trying to say is the prejudices that they may have against 100%. A certain group, because that's what they've defined this person's identity to be. And would you say it's problematic in any way? What's your thoughts on this?
I think so, yeah, because there's obviously during your life, there's so many people that are going to attribute to what you... Like Alamisa said, you said it in such a nice, they make sense way, but I'm going to say a bit complicated. People tell you the way that you have to be, kind of. I don't know, it's kind of weird. They say like, oh, it depends on the day, I feel like. If one day I'm like really loud with one person and with another person I'm really quiet, then they have different impressions of about me. Does it make sense?
Yeah, that's odd. Yeah, on a more personal level, that's 100% true. Yeah,
I see the labels that people attribute to Muslims, or whether if a person is covered up, they're recognized, or they attribute to someone that's oppressed. But that definition doesn't derive from Islam. So where does that come from? And then that's not unpacked or questioned or critiqued. So I think when you have these preconceived notions about a certain identity, I think you need to be able to ask, okay, where does this derive from? Is this actually from the community? What's the community saying? What is the actual Muslim woman saying? I need to hear their thoughts.
Yeah, I think I completely agree. In terms of the real consequences of this particular situation, in terms of creating identities for others, adding on labels, and doing all of this, around the world as well, it has huge issues in terms of being able to push forward a narrative against a group of people, and then be able to do, inconceivable actions to them in terms of things that are just unjustifiable by law. You know, we hear about so many atrocities occurring around the world. In a lot of those areas, if you ask some people will agree that that was probably the right thing to do, because in their minds, the identities that's been created about these people, you know, they have a very negative opinion on them. And so it follows through. So I think there are real life consequences to this type of thing. And it's really hard to kind of navigate, because we are all here and we've all, you know, living in the UK, we have quite weird concepts of identity because we're kind of mixed from so many different parts. But then we've all kind of come across, perhaps, or we've heard of experiences where people have been negatively targeted due to the fact that they have an image of them which isn't 100% true. But that's gone, you know, and affected them in a bad way.
I think one thing that I find really hard to reconcile is that when a certain identity is put on the pedestal against another, and there's like inconsistencies when it comes to defining people.
100%.
So one central group is afforded with justice and another group isn't, even though they...
It's criminalised because of their actions.
Exactly. And I think that for me is very difficult to navigate.
Why do you think that is? Why do you think our identities have come, like, history has progressed to a point where our identities, and I feel like we could come to a consensus on this, the fact that our identities does have a very direct effect on where kind of the sensibilities that we're afforded, and that type of thing, our place in the world, essentially, perhaps even the cost of human life. Why do you think, and how do you think we've reached that point?
I think you should go. I'm losing my
It's a big
thought.
question. Like, you can take a chance to think about it.
Can you repeat it? Because I need time to think about this.
So the fact that we've come to this point, like progressing through time to the point where we know, and we've seen very real life examples where people's identities does matter, right? In terms of, you know, how they're helped or if they are helped. How have we got to this point in time? Why has it happened? What's contributed to this process?
I think the short answer is I don't know if there's a particular deterministic way of approaching this, because there's multiple factors that perhaps contribute to this. And I think one way that we navigate through it is understanding that, like we mentioned in the previous half, is that people have these ideas of other people, but they're not willing to critique where it comes from. And so then when it's consolidated to that extent, it often can lead to people thinking, okay, well, this is the actual truth and this is fact. And they think it's objective when it's really not. And so when you're critiquing someone that has a staunch view of something, it's very difficult to rationalize with them. And so then this is transcended in terms of, you know, if it is transcended into policies, and then it becomes very normalized. And then that's why when we see these atrocities, it's justified because everyone else has this one approach or one way of thinking. So I think what it is that our lack of critique on certain policies, or even in terms of privilege, I think there's certain privileges that certain groups have, and they exercise that judgment, and so therefore that becomes the majority view, and the minority views are left behind, because they don't have that position of power to articulate themselves. And even if they do articulate themselves, they're not heard. And so then there's a disparity of power between those two groups. And people are not going to be able to kind of help themselves, because even if they try to articulate it, it's just not going to be heard.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point, and probably a right one, because it's the majority voice that is heard, not necessarily what is right that comes through. Because if the majority are saying one thing, then that is right in that sense. And in terms of being in places of privilege, I think I was watching an interview recently, and it was a discussion program as well, and they were talking about the current kind of refugee crisis, and, you know, all of this stuff about boats and whatnot. And they're saying that I think the host was, in my opinion, it was quite a tone deaf kind of response, because what she was saying was that why should we care about what the, you know, Convention for Human Rights says and the European kind of laws for human rights and things like that? Why do we need to care about what they say? These are our shores and our waters, and so if we want to send people away, we should be able to do that. And I think that, in my opinion, that was a very tone deaf response, because of the fact that you've obviously never ever seen or had anyone go through that experience before, or you've not even been in a position to hear the stories that people are saying, you do not have the basic understanding of the impact that has on the lives of those people. Because I feel like any human being will be able to sympathize with these people who are coming over on treacherous waters through no fault of their own, number one, and also for the fact that, you know, some of them have no choice in the matter. You wouldn't be able to say something so blasé and, like, you know, generalizing a statement as that, being like, it's our own waters, why can't we just forget about what international convention says? I was so shocked to hear that, because I think that shows the level of privilege that a lot of these people are sat at, and these are the people given a voice. And I'm like, how can you say we don't want to, you know, focus on an international convention of human rights? This is shocking to me, because I'm like, those things are in place to avoid issues which we are seeing in this day and age as well, where certain groups of people are targeted because of whatever reason, you know, which shouldn't happen. And these things are in place to prevent that from happening. And yet here we are in a position, we've circled back, you know, however many years after, and we're saying, actually, let's just disregard that and do whatever we want.
Yeah, I think what it signals is a larger symptom of society where everyone's individualistic. And so when you have these people of power, and they have, often it's driven by finance. When
financial incentives and
your financial incentive is being compromised, you won't be able to have that foresight to be able to empathize with that person, because your large amount of wealth might be jeopardized if there's a whole community that is seeking refuge, perhaps from the things that another country has done to them, even your own country that has done to them. And I think this is why it's really difficult for people to have these kind of conversations in those positions, because it's not about the collective at that point. That person's only thinking in a very tunnel vision way that my wealth is going to be impacted, and that's it. And they may argue that's completely wrong, and, you know, we don't see it that way. But then the question really lies, okay, then where's the sense of empathy? Why isn't there sense of empathy? Why is your immediate reaction as a human being not to be able to see someone else's suffering? Despite them may coming to your country, the fact that they have to take this treacherous route, and their whole life, they have to give their whole life away because they don't have sense of safety, how is that problematic in when they were trying to seek refuge?
Do you think that their identity plays a part into them having that type of mindset? Because do you think we sympathise a lot more with these people, maybe because you know, we've seen stories or heard people of our own backgrounds doing similar things, or even if not doing similar things, we're also childs of immigrants. We know the suffering that it takes to come to another country and you know, set up shop essentially. Yeah,
I agree with you. You sympathize a lot. And I remember when I was in school, from prior to school, they brought refugee people that, how you say people come to, there were people, persons that came from boats to the coast of, refugees basically. Yeah, so they came. And I remember they were giving a talk and they were saying how hard it was for them. And I remember one of the guys, he lost his mom. And just hearing that, and we were in high school, and it just makes you empathize a lot with these people. And then people that are empowered there, I feel like it's kind of, the smaller the circle, the more your identity is like shown. So it's like when there's a lot of people, it's a general thing that they're refugees and they're coming and I don't want them here. But then the smaller it gets, the more you see the suffering that each person is going through when they come.
I see.
There's so many things that to contend with, because it's political, it's financial, it's about even the identity of a whole entire country is contingent on how they negotiate with other countries. And so it's just, there's so much that there's so many things that are in line with what I'm trying to say is there's so many things that you have to contend with, and it's not something that's very simplistic, it's very complex. But the point of the matter is that whether it's complex or not, I think dehumanizing anyone, it should be just by default wrong. And I think that's something that's really difficult, especially you do see a lot of people who say that when they go into politics, they feel like they're compromising their values and morals and beliefs, because it's no longer about them and how they feel. It's about thinking about the wider party and their political views, and then the negotiation of different countries and how they interact with each other. There's so many things that you have to consider. And so for a lot of people, it's how do you reconcile with your morals and beliefs when everyone else perhaps haven't had that exposure, don't know how to have those uncomfortable conversations. And even if we move away from the conversation of
this specific example,
if you think about when you talk about microaggressions at work, it's very uncomfortable for a lot of people to think about how their sense of their lived experiences has informed the way they speak, and it's not completely right in terms of how it is received by another person, and that's why it's microaggression. And that's why there's so many trainings in place, because people have unconscious bias, right? So I think that's another example of showing that you have to be able to you have to exercise a certain sense of introspection, that you may have certain lived experiences that may have exposed you, or even the lack of exposure has informed your opinion, and you have to be able to be critical in how you implement your judgment, but also open to hear other people's point of views. I think if you walk through life and you have every one dimension and you have one particular view, and you're not open to hearing other people's views, you don't have to agree with it, but if you're closed off to hearing other people's opinions and you lack that empathy to see someone else's suffering, then you need to question, okay, where does this come from?
Yeah, very, very true. You were talking about the fact that, you know, a dehumanizing group of people should never be okay. I think that's all too often a weapon that we see being utilized by, you know, any type of whether that be political groups or whether that be, you know, on the general wider societal level around the world. We see that kind of technique being used. To what extent do you think language has an importance in being able to create an identity for people? And I guess it's in your forte as well.
Yeah, language is so powerful, the way you can describe a person. So that's why that's why I said in the beginning that when a certain group is afforded a sensibility and another group isn't, that's because the language is used to portray that certain group is different to another. Yeah. And so then you empathize more when someone is, okay, this person is fleeing from destruction and another person is coming to your shores. What does that show? One person is a burden and one person is someone that actually is in need. And so they may have the exact same positions, but one is afforded language that is 100% accurate to what they're experiencing, but another person isn't. And then you have to think about, okay, but why is there inconsistency?
Why is there that discrepancy? Yeah. Why is there that discrepancy?
Good question. I wish I knew the answer.
I think it's so strange to talk about, because we know the discrepancies are there. We can see them. And actually, a lot of people have been asked directly, these people who make these decisions, a lot of the time they are asked these questions quite directly by journalists, by media and whatnot. And they don't come to an answer.
Yeah, they tend to deflect.
They do tend to deflect. And I find it interesting, because I'm like, it's hard for us to come to a direct issue because we can't directly pinpoint what the reasoning is. And yet all of this goes on and it comes out to play in such a way where it's like, it's so obvious to see the discrepancy, and yet no one can do anything about it, it feels.
There was one experience when I went to the European Youth event in Strasbourg, where one of the delegates was questioning an MEP, and they were talking about...
What's an MEP?
Okay, it's like a member of parliament, but don't quote me on it. Anyways, it's something similar to that.
Okay.
So then the delegate was saying that, why is this one certain country in Europe is afforded a certain language, and the ethnic cleansing of another country isn't.
Yeah.
And the person that the position of power with kept saying, that's not the same case. It's not the same. And you actually see that same language used in a lot of other people who do this. When you try to ask that question directly, they say this is not the same instance, when quite directly it is.
And sometimes the other instances may be even worse.
Exactly. And the delegate kept saying, well, that doesn't answer my question, firstly. And secondly, all he's asking for is consistency. If you have one notion, you need to be applied to every single country.
That's true.
And then they just walk away.
Yeah.
Because they have nothing else to answer. And so at that point, you just question, well, why is certain principles afforded to one certain group and another isn't?
Because I think that's the main thing. It's not that one group should be afforded sensibilities over another. It's more that suffering at any regard shouldn't happen, especially to the extent which they are happening. If we are going to afford sensibilities to one group, why? The question is, why are we not doing it for all the groups that are out there? I think the kind of importance of language is huge there, because like you said, it affects the way that you think about it. But not only that, do you think like language can take away from the seriousness of an issue? I recently wrote a piece about kind of genocide in a particular part of the world, and genocide is a very big, very heavy word with quite serious implications because of the seriousness of what it's describing. And looking at kind of the history and looking at what's going on in that particular area of the world, it seems like that word isn't as actively used for that people. To me, in my opinion, it seemed like it was because of their identity, simply because of the fact that their identity isn't important enough to be afforded the use of that word. What do you guys think about that? And what do you guys think about language kind of taking away from the seriousness of an issue at hand?
I have no thoughts on it.
I think one of the things that we'll be talking about next week is the Bosnian genocide, and I think that's something that I didn't even come to know until a couple of years ago, and that's not studied in the curriculum. I think if anything else if the whole genocide took place in the landscape of Europe, surely we should know about this. Surely this should be in our history. And what was the reasons why this genocide came? It was the ethnic cleansing of a certain group of people who held an ideological belief, who are Muslims, and that's symptomatic of Islamophobia, and Islamophobia is very prevalent.
Yeah.
So I think that type of erasing of history really is detrimental, because it also points to the fact that certain groups are able to completely dismiss the experiences of people just because they don't have this certain identity, as you mentioned,
and they don't like fully empathize with the identity.
And fully don't empathize. And even if you think about colonial history in the UK, I only learnt about it when I got to university, and I paid for that. I don't have any recollection. I don't think there is any kind of pointers towards that kind of history through your education when you're younger, up till you're 18.
Yeah.
And it begs the question why.
Or they introduce you to the topic, but it's very brief. It's very glossed over. And in terms of, I guess you could say, the truths about what our involvement was in those situations, they don't go into half the depth that you would find out afterwards if you had interest in the topic to look it up yourself. And it kind of makes you beg the question of like, why is that the case? Why are we kind of conditioned to gloss over those things and not know our own history in more detail and depth? Why, in terms of this particular genocide, but also other genocides around the world that arguably some sources say are still occurring, and yet people, intergovernmental organizations, international organizations are still failing in that sector. Why is that happening? You know, so many big questions, and so many inequalities that essentially come at the heart of it.
It's quite depressing.
It is quite depressing.
It's quite sad.
But it kind of makes you realize the importance of the identity, your own identity, and the identity of your wider community, or the group or the demographic that you fit into. What is that identity? What is the perception that other people have of your identity, and how is that affecting you? Because our identities all affect even on a micro level, kind of the career that we're going to go into and all these types of things. But we are unfortunately at the end of our show. Thank you all very much for listening.
Thank you for listening to our podcast. Why not tune in to our live stream at inspirefm.org and follow and subscribe to our social media platforms at Inspire FM Luton.